Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the latest rendition of Young Red Angus Live. I'm your host, Jay Young. Thank you so much for viewing this episode of Young Red Angus Live. I really appreciate all you viewers, and I want to be clear about the focus of Young Red Angus Live. My purpose in hosting live shows is to bring you content and information that's going to help you do a better job or be more efficient at regenerative agriculture. So that's the heart, that's the focus, and that's the mindset of our program that we're trying to provide you guys with Young Red Angus Live. So, with that said, tonight's episode is sponsored by Fed and Happy. Go to fedandhappy.com. Dan Razier is the owner of Fed and Happy. He's done an amazing job creating a compost at a large scale so that farmers who want to be applying compost extract will have access to that. So they sell the compost. They also sell the red wiggler worms that you need if you're making a Johnson Sioux compost, a Johnson Sioux bioreactor, or if you're doing vermicomposting. So go to fedandhappy.com to order your red wiggler worms or to get started on your extracts or your compost teas that you're wanting to get in furrow that we've been doing. And I believe my guest has been doing some as well. So tonight's guest is Nick Voss. Nick has had a huge impact on my journey into regenerative agriculture. I started going to the Colorado Conservational Tillage Association puts on an event called the High Plains No-Till Conference. And I don't know if Nick was there in 2018 or 17, but one of those two first years, I got to hear him speak. And so ever since then, he's been someone that is, I've called occasionally for help or for information or insight into something. And he has a great wealth of knowledge and understanding. So I'm really excited about our guest. So Nick, thank you so much for joining us tonight on the live show.
You're welcome. Nice to meet you, Jay.
So, Nick, when you were originally from South Africa, correct?
Yes, sir.
So, what was your journey to the United States, and how did you go from someone who is from South Africa to being able to start your own farm, your own business, and be doing regenerative agriculture in Southwest Kansas?
Well, first time we come over was on a seasonal visa, and that didn't pencil out. And then we had someone that sponsored us on an employment-based deal, and we came back in 2006 on a green card, and we spent the next, I think, 9 years with that farming outfit, and then finally went on our own in 2014. And since 2014, we've been farming about 600-700 acres, and then, run a sheep flock and do a couple seed businesses. So we've been staying busy and diversify. I mean, I think the key to survival is diversity. And we talked about that a little bit before the call is, if you're a smaller scale guy, you got to hustle and you got to have multiple incomes and multiple streams of income. And a lot of the region folks preach it. And I can't say that's not true. So.
Right. So what was the process like when you got here, to realizing like you didn't want to just be here working for someone else? Like, when did that dream of owning your own farm take place, and how did you see, like, what was the challenges in getting that started?
We were, part of the management of the farm I was with, and we did own some land while I was in that business. And so, in South Africa, we were farming vegetables, and I guess, sometimes you're the employee and sometimes you're the employer, and you learn out of both, relationships, just managing the business, but also being the part of it that I think it's hard for some guys that get out of an inheritance role from a dad grandpa deal and have never been an employee. It's hard for them to successful manage something because they've never been in that shoes of someone that actually does the work. And so I think if you've both sides of the aisle, it gives you a lot of perspective and you appreciate what you do, and it's a lot easier working for yourself when you do that.
Yeah. So what was your, journey into regenerative agriculture? When did you start to find out that that was even a thing, and what was your
So we
process?
so we were not, I mean, we were full tillage in the vegetables in South Africa, but we've always been spoon feeding everything. And so when I got here, it was mind boggling to me where guys are putting in 200-300 pounds of nitrogen on a crop and then put it in the ground. And I'm like, dang, you start looking at the CEC and you start looking at organic matter and you're like, not all of that's available and not all of that's going to stay there. So we've always been on that side of the spoon feeding side, which is kind of part of the regen side, but not really realizing that we were, just because if that's the way guys farm vegetables pretty much outside of row crop, that's a normal thing. In 2010, we were at the national no-till, I think, and it was the first time I saw rare chileta, and that's kind of where it hit me. That's like, man, we would really be able to do more doing that. And we were already strip till and no till at the time. We were strip tilling corn on corn and then no tilling some of the wheat stubble, some of the bean stubble. And so that part of me, another guy that kind of taught me a little bit about the no till side of it was Russell. And he it's just, you learn a little bit and you talk with friends and stay outside of the coffee shop because you don't learn anything there, in my opinion. But just build relationships with people that are successful in doing something different. And so that's how we got to that. And then 2010 we started with cover crops, and got a mix at the time from a guy that was pretty knowledgeable in the area, but had a mix that was more for Eastern Kansas, and we brought it out to Western Kansas, and it absolutely failed. And so we learned from that. And then I met a gentleman in
Let's talk about that
Ohio.
real quick, Nick. Let's talk
Yes,
about
sir.
that real quick. Talk about, if you remember what was in that mix, talk about what it was in that mix and why it didn't work.
There was a lot of I'll just go out on a limb here because I can't remember exactly, but let's throw it out there. The buckwheats. Buckwheat is something that works about every 5th year for us. And so I've had buckwheat in a mix every year for like 7 years, never see it. And then 2 years ago, I had like half a bag left and threw it into the mix, and then I had buckwheat everywhere over the farm. And I'm like, okay, so what's the deal? So it's that's just one example, but a lot of things don't move west. If you really think about, I sell corn too, but if you look at corn, it's very geographic. A corn hybrid that works in Sedgwick County doesn't work in your county, doesn't work in my county. They don't move well. And
Yeah.
cover crops is no different. Cover crops don't always move west. A lot of guys like, well, if it works here, it works here. No, it don't. There's out west where we are here in the desert, you gotta pick your spices. And so a lot of times we stayed basic. I always joke about the Dust Bowl mix, but that's really how we started, because Jeff Reservoir is the guy that I really got me to look at two things: reduce your species and get your carbon to nitrogen ratio right. And when we started, we try to get 15 species in the mix and have a huge mix, grow a lot of carbon. And then for the next 2 years, you don't get rain, and all that residue is sitting there, and you can't plant a cash crop because nothing's cycling. So that was the key for us to get started. Is we had a saying, less is more and more is less. And that was the key to me to getting cover crops working out here west in the desert. Is all you have to do is keep it from blowing and have a living root. That's it. That's the goal. We don't build organic matter here by having a 12,000 pound mix above the ground. No, that's how you lose money. So that just doesn't work. We want to keep it from blowing and keep a living root, and that's the only goal out west. And when you have those two things managed and taken care of, and you don't have a ton of residue tying down nutrients, you can do both and make money. You can be profitable, have high yielding crops, and not have a yield drag. But when you try and grow carbon, you're gonna have yield drags.
So yeah, I guess let's finish up with that other deal, and I want to get back to some of those philosophies and how they differ from mainstream regenerative philosophies. What was some of the, after 2010, like what were some of the other influences that you had in the last 13 years or so?
really, I would say the biggest advantage is that I don't have family here, or at the time did not have family to tell me what to do and what not to do. And I think that's the biggest limitation in a general family farming environment. But we started 2010, and we just kept building on it. I mean, I don't remember if it was 10 or 11. The local NRCS office would stop and ran into the field and pull radishes and turnips and ran back into the car and get in the car and speed off. And I never knew who it was till we had Ray Archuleta here when they filmed that Kiss the Ground movie in 2015. And the ladies had told me who it was, and and admitted it was them, and we had fun with that after that. And some of them are still here, and they've been great for the cause. But it was funny, at the time I didn't know who it was, but
They were stealing it to eat them, right? It
I
wasn't
don't
like,
know if they wanted to eat them or just wanted to see what they were, because at the time, no one, I was on an air seeder talking to John Deere because I couldn't find radishes on the drop down menu to pick species at the time. And I was on with Stellar Support, and the guy cracked out laughing when I told him we're doing radishes. And he's like, "And you're where? And you're planting radishes?" It was a fun thing at the time because they wasn't even on the drop down menu on the John Deere deal.
that's funny. So when you brought that up originally, I thought, well, maybe somebody had told you like Japanese millet or something like that, loves water or loves waterlogged, soils. But let's talk about that. Like besides buckwheat, what other species have you seen that don't really work, or what systems don't work in Southwest Kansas that are
Pretty
fair?
much, if we start like with clovers, crimson and yellow sweet is about it. There's
Mm.
6 or 7 or 8 different kinds of clovers. We've tried them all. They're very, very limited. All the veggies are more success than not. And so we do a lot of common, we do a lot of hairy veg, we do a lot of chickling veg, and I love all 3 of them. And they all got their place and system. And it's hard not to mention why, but so seed size matters. We always joke about it, but you can't mix seed sizes. We're talking about west and east. In the east, where it's wet and you have humidity and you don't have 40-mile-an-hour winds with 12% humidity, you can add big and small species together, and you can drill it and put it half-inch in the ground, and it's going to come up. You do that out west, and if I drill it tomorrow or tomorrow that half-inch top half-inch is dry. The next 2 days after that, it's 1.5 inches deep dry. So you got to pick if you're going to stay small species or small seed or big seed. And so as a company, we've made that point clear to the farmers and to our customers. Is like, is this irrigated? Is this non-irrigated? If it's non-irrigated, you better be getting it deep, 1.5 inches, 2 inches deep. Well, then you go back and it's like, okay, if I want to be 1.5 inches, 2 inches deep, you need to have big seed because the small seeds won't come up from there. So even seed size is a challenge out here, because if it's irrigated, you can mix it, put it half-inch deep, keep the thing spinning and, making quick rounds and get it up. But in a non-irrigated environment, we cannot play around with small seeds because it dries out too fast. So we got to find something that'll sprout from 1.5 inches.
Yeah. See, and that's interesting. Like I guess I didn't even realize how much different we have it than you. And like do you know how far away you are from Burlington?
3.5.
3.5. Okay, so
You're about halfway, I think.
yeah, we're one. Yeah, we're one. I'm 1 hour and 10 minutes from Burlington. So you're southeast of me than 2 hours. So how
At
far?
least.
Yeah, so like just in that 2 hour span, just how different our environments are. Because for us, I can plant different species because we don't dry out quite as fast as you do. Our annual precipitation is 16. Is yours 12?
We're supposed to be 16 to 19. I told someone the other day, we've been over that one time in the 16, 17 years. I think twice in 17 years, we were over our annual, and the other 15, we were down. So I think 17 and I think 15, I think is the two that we were high. But other than that, we're usually 9 to 12, give or take, actual measurable. And if you take evaporation factor of like 90 inches, that doesn't go far.
So let's talk about like the specific soil health principles: armor on the soil, living root in the ground at all times. The oh man, you put somebody on the spot and then they draw a blank. Armor on the soil, living root, multiple species. Which two am I missing? Anyway, which ones do you find are the most important in your environment?
I would say living root and keep it covered. I have split personality issues with tillage.
Mhm.
Bryce and Michael and I always talk about it because Michael's 100% zero till,
Mhm.
and you know, if you look at his slopes, I get it. Where I'm flat, you can see a dog run for 4 days, so I don't have any runoff. I mean, you could have a bare field. We'll blow, but we don't have runoff because there's nowhere to run. So we do use like a sweep plow to terminate covers. I'm more on the tillage bandwagon than I am on the chemical bandwagon. And so with the sheep in the rotations, I'm trying to keep chemical off my fields. And
Mhm.
so that's a personal struggle we've had, we know, and I don't promote tillage by any means. I'm
Sure.
just saying for our operation, for what we do, I would prefer a tillage pass over a chemical pass in termination. And so, but I would say a living root and keeping it covered
Got it.
is the two that I would stand out. Animals needs to be probably number 3 if you want to throw that in, because I have seen huge differences bringing the sheep in. But at the same time, my northern farm, which this is the first year we've had sheep on it, 22 and 23 is now 2 years we've had back-to-back sheep on it. Before that, we've never had animals on it. And you can't dig in that field and not find worms. I mean, you can go anywhere in that field and put a shovel in and you'll have 5, 6, 7 worms on the shovel. So, you know, I wouldn't try, I would say definitely say animals is the cherry on top, but I don't think it's one of the key deals to get there.
Yeah.
But that field has had a living root on it and has had something on it and cover every day of its life for 9 years now.
But that's your irrigated circle?
Yep.
Okay. So if it's non-irrigated, do you still recommend the living root?
If it's non-irrigated, you got to pick your battles because you
Yep.
got to have a brown bridge if you're going to go to wheat.
Yep.
Mosaic's is gonna eat you alive for if you don't. So yes, 90 days is what they tell us. You know, again, that's the info we have at hand right now. 90 days, we starve microbes. So you can go more than 90 days, and 90 days is plenty for a brown bridge. So if you subtract that 90 days, yes, I think you can still have some kind of living root. Guys, you know, find the perception of living roots. Let's take rye for example. A lot of guys do rye as a cover in the fall. I've got guys that put 10 pounds of rye down and have no kochia in the spring. And guys are like, how? Well, 1, you've got competition. 2, you got living roots. And 3, you're pulling out the nitrogen. And if you get that nitrogen below what do they say? 50 parts per million is what Christine says. You know, you get it below 50 parts per million nitrogen, big wheats and kochia won't sprout. 10 pounds of rye will do all 3 of that. 10 pounds of rye is going to cost you $4 an acre. You don't have to break the bank to get a living root in the soil. And if you pull that 10 pounds of rye, if you dig, it's just packed with rhizome sheets. I mean, it's so you don't need 100-pound mix to keep stuff alive. And so I got a lot of my cotton guys. We just do 10 pounds of rye, 10 pounds of oats. The oats will freeze out. The rye will go through the winter. We terminate the rye in the spring. We go back to cotton in May, and we don't have any moisture issues.
You go back to
So
what in May?
what's cotton?
Okay, got it. Yeah,
So
I had never thought about the cereal rye thing. Have you ever thought about doing like, do you do that after corn or milo?
yeah.
Aw-
So our typical. So I was in Hutch area and did a presentation on our 28 bushel corn. And guys laughed at me. It's like, well, you can't make money with 28 bushel corn. And I was like, our county APH for Milo is 33 bushel. If you take the basis difference for 33 bushel Milo versus what you get for milo versus the chemical options you have on milo, and you go 28 bushel corn that I established an APH of, because Texas County, Oklahoma, non-irrigated corn is not insurable. So I had to prove that up to get to the point where they'll actually insure me. And that's the APH we established, was 28 bushel. And that 28 bushel was established with a cover crop in between those corn crops every year for 3 years in a row.
So it was
So,
dry corn. It was corn cover crop, corn cover crop.
yep, 3 years in a row.
See, and
So
that's kind of what I think for us is the future of soil health in my area, is stop trying to grow wheat, grow corn and interseed cover crops in between the rows, and put like a clover down.
we didn't even interseed. We planted early, got it out in September, drilled it, whether we had moisture or not, because you're not going to blow in the corn stalks. And
Right.
so we drilled it, and all we did was like 10 pounds of cereal, just for that, specific enzymes or specific diversity. But we focused on legumes and brassicas. All I wanted to do was cycle the corn stalks by the time I get to the next crop. Any moisture I got, I wanted the radish, the rape, the turnip, the vetch, the clovers. I wanted them to be alive, stay alive, and because it's all high nitrogen crops, and we needed the stalks deteriorated, and that's what we did, and it worked. I mean, we did that 3 years in a row to get to the deal, and then the 19 or 20 we hit that drought, and we're like, okay, it's time to quit and not do that, for 2 more years, and we haven't done it since. For 2 years in a row now, we've stayed away from corn, because if you don't have a profile, out here, for as good as I do, non-irrigated is a no-go if you don't have it. It just, you start out dry, you're not going to make it.
Yeah, no. So I think for us, I mean, as long as you have the moisture to do it, if you can plant corn, what I want to do is we're going to interseed some cover crops in our corn and our milo, and I want to have low populations of annual rye and clover, and so that over the winter those two species will go to keep the living root in the ground, but it'll be such a small population that I feel like it'll keep at least some of the biology alive, without it going dormant, and then you can terminate it and then possibly go back to corn.
See, we have not had any luck with the annual ryegrass, just because of the seed size, and it blows 3 counties over if you get a 70-mile wind. And then you contaminate wheat. So we've stayed with the cereal rye for that reason. It's no different than wheat or triticale, and you can control where you put it and it doesn't blow. But my point is, guys keep thinking they need to have, even the cattle grazing guys, they want to cover, and they're like, oh, we got to go 70, 80 pounds. And I'm like, yeah, just because you're not seeing it doesn't mean it's not worth it. You got, above ground force, then you got below ground force. And sometimes you got to feed both, and they're just wanting to feed the cows, and they're thinking it's not worthwhile. Well, if I can't graze it, it's not worthwhile. Well, they're missing the point. I mean, you got to feed the microbes too. And like I said, a $6, $8, $10 mix for 10 pounds of rye and a pound of rape, pound of radish kind of deal goes a long way through the winter.
Yeah, absolutely. What has your experiences been with like biologicals and extracts? Have you done?
We've done both. I work with a few organic guys, and learn from them on the extracts. And the biggest problem with the extract is timeliness to get the compost tea, through the pivot. They got to run a 24-hour quick pass to get it all in while it's still functional, because they can't keep it aerobic once they put it in the pivot tank. And so that's been a challenge. And we've jumped on a biological about 4 years ago that we work with, that we're really, really happy with and really like. And like Bryce calls it the easy button. It's no different than compost tea. It's no different than an extract, but it's for the guys who don't want to, be building, don't have the time to build it, don't have the labor to babysit the Johnson's too over the winter. And so I guess there's a market for each one. So I work with both guys. I think it's a choice deal. I have no beef with either side of the line. Do we need to have an extract going into the furrow? Absolutely. I'm 110% on that. How we get the extract and whose extract it is, I think it's irrelevant. I think as long as we need to focus that guys need to realize what they missed without the biology, and they need to get that biology. When that seed germinates, it needs to have everything it needs.
Yep. Let's go ahead and explain to them why you feel like it's irrelevant. Because I don't disagree with you, but I want to get your perspective on it.
I think if you find a company that knows what they're doing, I think it's irrelevant where you get it from. If you can have a mix that's got a good mix, balanced mix of bacteria, protists, fungi with a food source, I don't think it matters where it comes from or you know who makes it. If I think there's a lot, obviously there's 500 companies out there that tells you they have something and they don't. So that's why, you know, to me, I'm more concerned about making sure there's actual fungi and actual food source to keep the fungi and the bacteria alive and fed. You know, people tell us that, you know, when a mycorrhizal fungi spore, you know, awakens, it needs a living root within 24 hours. A lot of these companies put their extract in furrow without a food source. Well, when you plant that seed, how long does it take to germinate? 3, 4, 5 days. So by the time that seed germinates, well, the fungi is dead because it didn't have a food source. So I think the companies that do it right, that realize you need to do a biochar, you need to do a molasses, you need to do sugar, you know, seaweed extract. There's a lot of things that go into that mix that's well worth it, that I think guys need to focus on more about how keeping it alive. I talked to a company that provides, you know, nitrogen fixating bacteria the other day, and we're talking about competencies, and you know, they said, well, you know, it's dead within so much time with your fertilizer. I said, well, did you try a food source with it? No. But then how do you know it's compatible? Because if you don't have a food source with it, how are you going to keep it alive when you put it in the soil in a normal environment? So I think guys are missing the point about keeping it alive, because just by putting it in the soil doesn't help if you can't keep it. It's like, you know, trying to get kids to go play a soccer match, but you don't feed them the morning or the lunchtime and expect them to have the energy to play soccer. It ain't going to work. You got to keep that stuff alive and keep it fed till it can multiply and build the colony that they need and start working.
Yeah. Well, and I think that that's a key point there too, is with what you said. Like, it doesn't matter in that, in my opinion, it doesn't matter in that the soil is so starved of the biology that it needs biology out there. Like, adding the biology is super important. But sourcing the company that you can trust, like, that's why I really like, you know, Fed and Happy, because they have a compost that they've worked on that's 15, you know, months old. And, you know, whether it's Fed and Happy or Bio 5, like, you know, like Bio 5, for example, that we put in last year, like, there was such a huge response to our irrigated corn. You know, I didn't see a difference in doing Bio 5 in furrow or Johnson Sioux in furrow. You know, so like, if you find these companies, you know, like Fed and Happy, like, where they've gone through, he did a gosh, who was it that Jonathan Lundgren looked at his soil samples, and his customer went from October having a 4-to-1 bacteria to fungus to having 1-to-1 from October till now by doing applications of Fed and Happy. So I mean, you can see a huge response to, you know, to these biologicals if you're doing the right ones, and if you.
I agree, and you know, we've started. I mean, we've been on the biological bandwagon probably since 13 or 14. So we've been almost 10 years trying different programs. And that's why I'm saying, when you find the right company that with the right program and the right product, it really helps to figure out. I don't know if you've met, I think you did. Dr. Stark was up there in Burlington, and that's, you know, we jumped on then with the organic side 4 years ago. And I'm super happy with, I mean, that thing with Dr. Stark is he explains to you things in layman terms. So whether you a guy that's been in the business for 8, 9, 10 years, or you're a starter farmer, he can explain to you what you're missing, what you're waking up, what you need, how you starve, how you don't starve. And that's you know, the same with you guys is like, you know, if you find someone that can explain it, have the service backup, can answer questions, do a Q&A, explain it all, those companies are few and far apart. And that's why when I, you know, got connected with the organics guys, I'm absolutely, I mean, I love the product, love what they do. You can dig, you can smell. I had someone in the cooler today, and you can just smell that stuff brewing in there. It's just, I mean, it's pretty good stuff. So, but my point is, it's like I think if you find a legit company, to me, it's more important to actually have it in furrow than not having it. And I think there's a lot of ways the guys can argue this way or that way, who's best or who's not best. But to me, it's more making sure guys do have it, and make sure guys spend the money to put it on. Because if you do a total digest test, you'll realize how much fertilizer you do have stored in the soil that we're ignoring right now with the chemical structure or chemical driven programs that we do.
Okay. So have you done, like, how often do you do a total nutrition digestion test?
K-State did mine 3 years ago, and
Okay.
I just on the North Farm. I just sent samples in on the South Farm for this year. So
To
we'll
K-State again?
see. Mhm.
Was it to K-State again, or just
No, it was toward this time.
okay?
And anyway, yeah, what's his name? Augustine is the one that comes down and works on the North Field.
Oh
But
yeah, he's great.
yeah, so the South Farms are in Oklahoma. So, I don't want to K-State, OSU, match there. So we try and, I haven't worked with OSU much and probably need to on the South stuff, but I just send those samples into Ward for now.
Do you remember what some of your responses were? I mean, like how much like nitrogen and phosphorus you got?
I gotta look, but I know FOS was like 660, 670 pounds of FOS that I had on the top 12 inches on the North Farm. And that's just the top 12 inches.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. So like,
it's mind boggling.
I think ours was 1,200, and then it ended up being 5,000 pounds of mez. So like for you, that would be like 2,500 pounds of mez. And I
It's a big difference.
yeah, well, and when I was doing like I did a YouTube video called "The Phosphorus Problem," and in that video, and I got I brought this up before, but I got that idea from the webinar that Dr. Christine Jones did with Green Cover Seeds. Hers was called the Phosphorus Paradox. So I'm like watching this, I'm like, oh, I'm seeing this, from what we did with the test we do with Lance. Well, I in that video I talk about how we have phosphorus, how it's tied up in our soils, and how we have access to it through the biology, that the biology is able to take the phosphorus and break it down and bring it to the plant, in a form that it can handle, and about how it ties up the calcium in our soils. And so it's literally making calcium and phosphorus available to our plant. And it was amazing how many people were just ridiculed me, saying, you have to add phosphorus. Like, talk to me in 10 years when you have no phosphorus left in your ground. And I'm like, did you hear what I said about the complete nutrition digestion test? It's like they're so ingrained to the old way, they can't break out of that mindset.
So on our North Farm, it's kind of funny you mentioned that. On our North Farm, on a traditional P1, we've been 9 to 12 parts per million for the last 7, 8, or 9 years. And I've done tissue samples. We grew corn there till a couple of years ago when we started putting Bermuda in for the sheep, and we're moving it to a more forage and sheep circle for that purpose. But we grew corn there, half circle, full circle, quarter circle, whatever we wanted rotation on. And we had a 200 plus APH on that farm, and our FOS program, I think for the last 6 or 7 years since that we grew corn there, was 2.5 pounds of FOS in furrow, and that was the only FOS we put on. And we never had FOS deficiencies, and our P1 stays at 9 to 12 parts per million. So we haven't done anything to go less, and yet we're pulling it 4, 5, 6, 7 foot deep. We had an excavator there one day to fix a pivot cable, and we went 5 feet deep and had roots 5 feet deep. You can't see a texture difference. I mean, it looks the same all the way 5 foot down. And I know I had this conversation with Candy, on parent soil, and it's like, well, you don't have parent soil; it's all blown in. So it was kind of funny, but yeah, we've seen similar things. I mean, guys can back off a long ways and get by. I'm not saying go cold turkey by any means on a guy that's been in a chemical program, because I don't think you can beef up your biology that quickly to walk away from it. But it's definitely a curve that the guys need to get on and improve the biology and get off the synthetics.
Okay. Double O Grazing Company had a question for you. He was wondering if your Bermuda grass survived the drought.
They did not. It's irrigated, so but it's limited irrigated, and it's funny. We neighbor of ours came and sprigged the Bermuda, and we had a well go out, and then had the so the motor went out on the well, got the motor fixed 6-7 days later, cranked it up. The electrician calls me, he's like, it's running great. And I was like, cool. And then 15 minutes later, he's like, well, the VFD went up in flames. And I'm like, okay, well, not so good. So we were out and then got that going. We got it back up the Monday night. The Tuesday night, the storm blew the pivot over. And so we were out, long story short, for 6 weeks right after we sprigged it. So we lost probably 40% of our stand. Got everything going, watered it, and we got it back going, but we've got quite a bit of skips in there. So talked to the neighbor actually today, and he's going to go look at it as soon as we dry out after this beautiful rain we had, and go see if I was thinking to drill some Bermuda seed and some oats in there just to fill the spots and not have bare spots where weeds come up. So he was going to go look at that and see, but I would say we survived about 50, 60, 70% of the Bermuda. So, I mean, under all circumstances, I think it would good. Nothing's blowing. It held good. We grazed sheep for 3 or 4 or 5 months in the fall there.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm glad you brought the sheep because I want to kind of transition to that. So, what got you into the sheep? What was your past experiences with sheep, and why did you choose them as opposed to cattle? And what are the pros and the cons there?
So I grew up with sheep and Brahma cattle, and I just despise cattle. So it was never a thing that a choice for. But we got here in 2006 and got some sheep in 2007, and we eat a lot of lamb. So for us, it was just getting something like chickens and eggs, something we could go and butcher ourselves and have meat. And then we got back into the Dorpers, and which is the breed we have now. They're a hair breed. You don't shear them. They're one of the easy care breeds. They're probably best carcass. We call them the Black Angus of the sheep industry. But sweet meat, very good carcass competitions. Wins 90% of the carcass competitions. Just a very good bone to meat ratio sheep. But we got back in them in 2007. And we've had them since, but we've never had them commercially. It was 10, 15, 20 more as a hobby. And then 2016, we started getting into the commercial side of it, and my wife started taking care of it. And then 18, she quit her day job in town and she went full time. And then also 18, I was looking at her side of the balance sheet and looking at my side of the balance sheet, and I'm like, we're struggling to make it, on the farm, on the acres we have. And I'm looking across the aisle, and she's doubling her balance sheet every year with the equity that she has. And I'm like, okay, we gotta be able to put these two together. And so 18, we got the chance to buy another quarter in Oklahoma, and that became the sheep quarter. And so she's been commercially going with them. And then now, pretty much every acre we farm, we try and rotate the sheep on. And so that has been a huge help for us on weed control. A lot of guys fight kochia, fight pig weeds on our acres. We hardly ever have to spray a post-emerge. We either got to do a pre-emerge or we plant and do a post-emerge, a single spray. But we've gotten away with probably 60% of our chemical program because of the sheep. And I've always put a slide up. You get anywhere from 40 to 100 pounds of nitrogen, phos, and potassium with the sheep manure as well on the mob grazing principle that we graze. So, we've got a fertilizer by another 20-30% because of them. Huge advantages. Just more profitable than if you look. I think someone did a comparison on cow and sheep, and I've put it up too. But if you look at 2 to 6 lambs a year from a ewe, versus a cow calf, I can sell it 4 months old, breeder back, so I can have 2 sets of lambs out of a ewe a year versus how long it takes to sell a calf. So it's just a difference deal, and way more profitable. they are more finicky. You know, a lot of people's like, you know, don't build the fence with corners because they'll find a corner to die. And, you know, if you put up a fence, you know, put it up in a circle so they can't find a corner to die in. So that's why we got circles that we graze, you know, there's no corners. So, but other than that, they're very profitable.
So, and like, what are the challenges with them? Like, they are harder to slightly harder to work and to vaccinate.
Not much. I would say they're easier than cows to worm, easier than cows to vaccinate. We do vaccinate with CDT, but we do not worm. If we worm a sheep, we sell it. We don't keep any genetics, mothers or sires or lambs that we have to treat for worms. So we're pretty proud of the fact that we sell a lot of replacement ewe lambs off the farm, and the reason guys are looking for them is because we have a zero tolerance for deworming. It's all rotation and genetics on our worming. If we treat anything, it's off the farm.
So, what you got into the registered side of the sheep, haven't you?
Yes.
Okay, so
We got into that side of it also 16. We went and bought our first 7 ewes down in Texas. And right now she's probably got 70 ewes and about 70 lambs on the ground. So she's done really well. We've bought some embryo rams in the last 2-3 years. We're finally getting to the point where I don't know how you type cows, but in the sheep deal, it's type 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, where 1 and 2 is culls, 3 is flock, and then 4 and 5 is stud. And so right now she's got about, out of the 70 ewes, she's got about a 50 type 5 ewes, which is as high as you can go. And so they're, you know, that's where we start breeding. And we have a South African inspectors that we get every year to come and type the sheep and go through the flock. And the guy we had last year, he wants us to get to a third tier 5. So you got, you know, 2 type 5s, then the daughter is a type 5, and then the granddaughter is a type 5, and then that granddaughter is what you start building with. And we're fortunate that we actually have our first 4th generation type 5s that we'll have this year. So that's pretty, you know, landmark for us that we wanted to do, that we finally getting to. But you know, we try and buy the best rams. Money is really not relevant when we try and buy a ram. If we want a ram, whatever he sells for, we're gonna pay it. It's just there's very limited high quality genetics in the country on the Dorper side. And so whatever we can find something that is very good conformation and type according to the South African standards, we go after him.
right. So, what are your markets in Southwest Kansas for selling the meat, and then like what are your markets for selling the registered side of it and getting your
Right now,
genetics?
because of the drought, we used to feed out the ram lambs on pasture and get them to about 120 pounds and take them to a packer. But with the drought, we just can't afford that. And, you know, we ran out of hay. I mean, you know as good as I do, the whole western part of Kansas pretty much ran out of hay last year summer already. So I just got 2 loads of hay from Illinois, and it's not because of this or that, it's just where I could find some. But so the drought has gotten us to where we wean. We'll dry lot them 30 days on a creep feed mix, and then they go to the cell barn. We keep back probably the top 10% growth. So we weigh them when we wean them. Then 30 days later we weigh them again, and the top 10% in growth we keep for replacement ram lambs for the commercial guys. The bottom 10% will go to the sale barn, and then everything in the middle will sell to a higher end market, whether it's an ethnic market or a sale barn that has, you know, that's got a buyer for them. And then also we sell off the farm quite a few. We got a packer in Garden that we work with that, you know, we probably sell three to 6 a month down there too. So
Yeah, so I mean, Garden City helps you a lot because there's so many ethnic groups within Garden City that lamb is a staple in their diet. So I mean, that's another huge benefit. Like, is it not?
yeah, I think so. We like I said, we work with Urshmans down in Garden, and they're great people to work with for us. We have not had a complaint, and we do move a lot. The customer deals with them. We just deliver the lamb. They deal with the customer. The customer tells them how they want it cut. We stay out of that process, and we just charge them per pound.
Got him. So when you guys are doing rotational grazing with the lambs and stuff, what are your processes? Are you trying to move them every day, every other day, every 3 days? Like, what are your?
It just depends on GDUs and moisture and how big they are. Like right now, we have probably like one baby to every mama for what's out there. And when those mouths start feeding, then everything conventional goes out the window when it comes to rotation. But we try, it's usually anywhere from a 2-day to a 7-day rotation. And we usually have 6 paddocks. We'll have 3 10-acre pies in each of the 2. So we have 60 acres. It's divided into 10-acre pies right now. And we'll graze each one of those. Actually, we have 9 right now. So we have 9 pies right now, and it's all triticale. And it's anywhere from 2 days to 7 days, depending on sunshine, depending on moisture, depending on how hungry they are. But we move them every 2 to 7 days. It just depends.
Right. Do you notice any more compaction issues, like if you have to wait 7 days?
No, there's really no. It just depends. The thing with cows is a lot of guys, when they do covers, it's like take 50% down, move them on. We don't do that with the sheep. We graze like the triticale. It looks like it's a tail. I mean, it's bare when we move them, and then we move them on. And the next day, like when we move them off a triticale field, the pivot usually follows them. So they go like rotational clockwise or anti-clockwise, depending on the direction of the pivot. So the pivot always follows them, and we'll put on 1 to 2 inches behind them. And if they get off the pie, the next day the pivot's on there, and the next day we'll have 3-4 inch growth already. The amount of growth that they stimulate with their grazing is mind-boggling. So no, we have not seen. I mean, it's funny when the pivot. So the worms kind of when the crust dries out, the worms will go down. You won't see the worm castings. When that pivot goes over, the next day it looks like 1,000 little hills on that ground where the worms come up, and to get the I don't know if they come get oxygen or come get manure or pellets or whatever they do, but it's really funny when you follow the pivot every time around. 6, 7, 8, 9 days later, every time the pivot comes around, it's just millions of earthworms. I mean, it's really cool to see, actually.
Yeah, that is really awesome. So what is it like that the sheep enjoy the most as far as like their forage? Does it not really matter, like, because you're with the way
As long as there's something green in the mix. Like last year, our winter stockpile, the radishes froze out. We did not put rape in it, which we should have. We didn't put a winter cover in it, which we should have. So we're learning as we're going. But as long as they have something green in that mix, it doesn't have to be a lot. But as long as they have 1 or 2% of that mix that you winter stockpile and it's green, they can digest, they can maintain body weight. We get more twins, we get more triplets. It's a day and night difference if we can get that enzymes in their gut from the green versus just being dry residue out there in mineral.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, Nick, what are some of the things that you're going to try this year in 2023 that's new for your farm and that you're kind of excited about?
So we're going to do some mixing on some cash crop, and it's always a fight between me and the boss woman. She runs the sheep, but it's always a tug of war on how many acres we're going to have cash crop, how many acres we're going to have feedstock or sheep grazing. And so something I thought of this year that we're going to do different is instead of grain sorghum, we're going to do forage sorghum and grain sorghum both. We're going to do 2 pies. One of them is going to be grain sorghum and cowpeas. The other one's going to be forage sorghum and soybeans. And so we're going to try and see the forage sorghum, we want residue, and the soybeans, we want to try and have it green. So on the forage sorghum, we're going to try and cut the forage sorghum and then go in and bale that with the green soybeans in that with the dry stalks, and see if we can improve the relative feed quality and value of that milo stalk for us a little bit. So that's one side of it. And then go back to triticale right behind the baler. The other side of it, we're going to do cowpeas and milo, normal grain sorghum, and then not just harvest the milo, but leave the cowpeas, because you can't really let soybean residue get dry because of the soybeans actually in it, but you can't bale it when it's green. Well, cowpeas is the opposite. You can let cowpeas, they very high nutritional value, both the peas and the residue. So we don't mind it getting dry and mature. So on the cowpea side with the grain sorghum, we're going to plant that together, probably 6 pounds of sorghum and 10 pounds of cowpeas, and then let them mature, harvest the milo, and leave that for a winter residue, and see if we can again get the relative feed quality a little up, get a little more twins, little better body scar through the winter.
So on that, that's unirrigated then?
That's all irrigated.
Okay, yeah. Have
That
you
will be
thought about
irrigated.
doing a dry land with the milo and the cowpeas?
That is a goal this year too, is to have, actually, we're going to do a multi-species mix. We're going to do more than just that. And
Okay.
the chances are we're probably going to go forage sorghum very little bit, and then but have a multi-species mix in it, and see if we get to harvest it, we harvest it. If we don't get to harvest it, we're just going to graze it. We can graze grain or grain sorghum or the actual sorghum part with ewes. It's just rams. You can't put rams on sorghum because they get urinary calculi, which is a pain. And so, but the ewes don't have it and don't get it. So we haven't had any issues if there's residue, grain on the milo. Like, we clip heads when we harvest the milo. We try and leave as much residue as possible, and the ewes don't have a problem, picking up that milo, but the rams do.
Right. So when you harvest that, you're just going to try to cut it like it's a regular, field of milo, even though it's like
Yep.
it's going to be a Sudan, so it's going to be taller, or it's just a
Yeah, it's going to be a forage sorghum, so it'll be 6-7 feet tall. So
Okay.
we'll try and harvest that, just clip the heads. Even if we get 20-25 bushel out of it, we just want the cash side of it to pay for the experiment, but still leave 5-6 foot of residue, because a lot of times when you cut milo, all you have left is like 18 inches on non-irrigated.
What are you planning on putting out there? Is it going to be cows or what?
Say that again.
What's the variety of milo?
We do on the grain sorghum, it'll be adventure. On the forage sorghum, same thing. It'll be 305, which
Okay.
is a Corteva product.
Okay. I might get that from you because I want to try something similar to that.
Yeah, we're always playing around, and so we're gonna play around with species, play around with height, size, see what a combine can manage. If it can't manage it, worst case scenario, if they can't manage it, you have good grazing. So, when you have a backup like cows and sheep, then really you don't have a failed crop ever, because if you have a failed crop, you have good grazing.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. You said Corteva 305?
It's a AV 305. I'll send you the details.
Okay.
It's a forage sorghum.
Yeah, I am. Well, Nick, is there anything else that you wanted to share tonight before we close off this episode?
Not a whole lot. I mean, we talked a little bit too, but just guys who scared of trying things, on our scale, the multiple streams of income. There's several guys that do off-farm jobs and do this on the side. I don't know if you talked to Tyrell yet or not. He's one of the guys that have sheep on the side, who does a day job on the other side and grow things, do things right. And so there's several of us that, are not 5,000 acre farmers that seem to be able to, do things profitable and get things done. And so guys just need to, it's not that overwhelming if you do one thing at a time and 1 acre at a time. Again, for us, more is less and less is more. We got to be able to focus on the things that work and stop listening to North Dakota and Eastern Kansas, because they don't know nothing that's going on here. And I don't mean to pick on anyone, but it's just a reality.
Yeah, no, I mean, we brought that up before the show. And for those of you guys who don't know, in 2020, I posted a picture of ground that I had in cover crops 3 years in a row, and then we planted milo, and I had steers out there. I had them out there probably just a little bit too long, got them off, and then that in 2020, December of 2020, we had the bomb cyclone hit, or I guess that was 2021. Get my years mixed up. Anyway, we had our ground blow, and I just posted the pictures encouraging people like, hey, you're gonna you're gonna face trials, like keep going. And I got roasted by so many of those, or so many people that were on that Facebook group about, well, if you would have just planted a cover crop, or if you'd have just done this or this or this. And for our context, like so many people outside of Western Kansas and dry areas don't realize like how fragile things can be, and how tough wind erosion is, and
Yep.
how nearly impossible it is to
Like
fight.
like I told you when we started, I got a pasture that's blowing right now. It's not blowing, but you can see the damage.
Yeah.
And someone, posted, yeah, you should have had a cover crop. And I'm like, yeah, we've had 4 cover crops in a row being planted there. And that's probably the reason it's blowing, because every time we disturb the soil with the drill, that's another inch and a half of furrow that it's, get loose sand to blow. But yeah, I mean, I planted covers in the fall. The seed's still laying there just like it is. With this rain we got today, I bet some of that wheat that we planted in September will sprout.
Yeah.
So guys, it's perspective. It's like, you should have drilled a cover crop. Yeah, I know we did, that's kind of how it is. So yeah, it's just guys outside of our little dust bowl zone are pretty clueless sometimes of what we face, and
Yeah.
don't realize, how tough it is out here. But it seems to be what works, and we're happy and blessed, so we keep doing it.
Yeah. Well, guys, thank you so much for watching this week's episode of Young Red Angus Live. Nick, thank you so much for joining us. Last week, I was supposed to have Dr. James White on the show, and my internet went out, so I wasn't able to have him as a guest. I'm trying to get it worked out to get Dr. James White rescheduled. Next Wednesday night, we will have Jen Garish, so I hope you guys are able to join us for that. Again, Nick, thank you so much for joining us, and that
Welcome,
concludes
Jay. Thank
the
you.
episode. Yep. All right. Good night, guys. Oh, I have to. Oh, are you there, Nick?